From the second floor of the Duncan Student Center, you're watching Shamrock Sports. Today, the crew discusses how Benjamin Morrison will hold up against Marvin Harrison, what the Notre Dame offensive line will have to do against an athletic Ohio State defense. And as always, our betting expert JJ Post will give you his picks for one of the biggest college football Saturdays ever. This and more all coming up on NDTV.
It has been a year between these two teams met in Columbus a year ago. One thing remains for certain, though. Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman are due battle, but the men in the pocket have changed. Kyle McCord takes over for Ohio State, and Sam Hartman takes over. But there is one thing that still remains along with the two coaches. It is the anticipation this two-game brings. And along with Elise Dohoney, I'm Jacob Irons here from the second floor of the Duncan Student Center. Elise, anticipation for this matchup has been going since it was released.
No, and especially this week, this campus has been buzzing. I just this morning was trying to walk to the Student Center. We got buses, we got different journalists there, we have fans, we have new signs. This game is going to be the big game of the season. First night game of the season. It's going to be a big one. There
is going to be a lot to it, and we're hyped up here. But there's only two men that are even more hyped for this, and that's Tyler Reedy and Andrew McGinnis, the two guys calling the game for WVFI, the student radio station. Guys, you're up in the broadcast booth. Take it away.
Thank you, Jake. Along with Andrew McGinnis, I'm Tyler Reedy. We will be your broadcasters for WVFI Sports Radio, the voice of the Fighting Irish, this Saturday night when Notre Dame hosts Ohio State in a 9-versus-6 matchup here in South Bend. Andrew, should be a great one. A lot of big storylines to discuss with both teams. Starting with Ohio State, you've got head coach Ryan Day, who's won nearly 90% of the games he's coached at OSU, but still feels a little bit like he's on the hot seat, at least in Columbus, but this could be a big one to dispel some of those notions that he can't win the big ones.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, the two losses to Michigan each of the last couple seasons. You know, there are people who think if he loses this game and he loses to Michigan again, his job might be gone. So this is a huge game for Ryan Day. It's very rare that Notre Dame has come into a big game like this where they aren't the ones facing the most pressure to prove themselves. It's also really rare they've come into this type of game with a quarterback advantage, but that's what they think they have. Certainly everyone thinks they have with the way Sam Hartman's played. Kyle McCord's been very solid as well for Ohio State, but Hartman, he elevates the floor of this Notre Dame team. Now it's time to see how high he can elevate the ceiling as he gets ready for his first big game of the year.
And on the Notre Dame side, not a great record over the past 25 years or so in top 10 matchups like this one. Have to go back to the Lou Holtz era in the 80s and the 90s to picture some of those major victories, especially here in South Bend. But this one, a tremendous opportunity for the Fighting Irish to jump into that elite class of college football and prove that they can get it done and maybe be a championship contender down the road.
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, talking about the advantage Notre Dame has at quarterback. Looking at what this game was last year when these two teams met in week one, Notre Dame was very clearly, punching up. First-year head coach, first-time starting quarterback. The Irish were outmanned at almost every single position except for probably tight end with Michael Mayer. But this year, things feel a little bit more even. Ohio State does have an advantage, I'd say, at most positions of the field, but the gap has been closer. Obviously, the most important position on the field, Notre Dame is the upper team in that department of quarterback play, of course. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this one goes down. I'm expecting a close, very competitive game.
It'll be Irish Wear Green night. The full green uniforms will be in effect for the first time, and it'll be a thriller Saturday evening here in South Bend. If you can't be at Notre Dame Stadium, hope you can join us. For Andrew McGinnis, I'm Tyler Reedy.
Hey, but before we can really jump forward, we need to start looking at what happened last week for both these two teams. So let's get right into it, and let's start looking at the teams and the two games so far. Let's start with Ohio State. They were taking on Western Kentucky in the Horseshoe early in the first quarter. McCord would hand it to Travion Henderson, who cuts it back to the short side of the field. OSU up 7. Now, in the second quarter, OSU up 7 to the Toppers, converted on the field. Henderson again cuts it to the near side of the field and breaks into the end zone. Ohio State 14-3. Then, don't count out the Hilltoppers just yet. Reed would sling it to Malachi Corley and walks in to force it into the end zone. Hilltoppers only down 4. 3 seconds later, after letting the kickoff go for a touchback, McCord would respond to a bomb of a throw to Marvin Harrison Jr. to make a house call. They lead 21-10, and Ohio State would never let this go. In the fourth quarter, leading by 46, Ohio State's defense would get in on the fun with a pick 6 to put an exclamation mark on the game. They win 66-10, Ohio State convincingly. Now, for the Irish, they were taking on Central Michigan. Now, early in the first quarter, Hartman would start with a bang. A deep ball finds Tobias Merriweather for a 75-yard strike. Irish get on the board first, and he is looking to the student section. And 7:28 left in the first quarter. See respond. Miles Bailey takes it up the gut. The Chippewas get the ball on the board to tie the game at 7 with the ball crossing the plane before it came. Still in the first quarter, Irish electing to go for it on 4th and 1. Estime finds a gap and breaks in, staying on its feet. Irish now 14-7. And then, in the final seconds of the half, Irish leading by 14. Jace Bauer keeps it himself and works it by the blockers to work it into the end zone. Chippewas within 7 of the Irish. That would be the closest they would get all day long. And in the fourth quarter, Irish leading 34-17. Hartman drops back into the pocket and finds the streak. Oh boy, that's a one-handed grab for the tight end. And Irish win 41-17.
Okay, I'm here back with Elise Dohoney here and JJ Post. And JJ, we have a lot to talk about in terms of that OSU offense. The OSU offense has been on fire all season long. Will Notre Dame, with Sam Hartman, this new quarterback, will Notre Dame have a response on the offensive side?
Yeah, I think tempo is going to be key for Notre Dame this game because we know Ohio State's going to get points. You know, Notre Dame's defense has been solid this year, and I think they're going to have a good game plan. But Ohio State's going to get theirs. They have the weapons to be dynamic at any given time. They're going to put up points, and Notre Dame's going to need to match them. This is not be a game that's going to end up a 17-10 game. It's not going to be like last year, where Notre Dame did their best to keep it to a 21-10 kind of slugfest. Even then, Ohio State won that game. But I do think Notre Dame is going to want to do what they did last year, which is keep the game in their control in terms of this pace of play. Notre Dame wanted to hold the ball for a long period of time against Ohio State. They wanted to make sure Ohio State's offense stayed off the field, and they mostly relied on the running attack to do so. They did so with mixed success. They couldn't really get it going on the ground, especially once Ohio State made adjustments to the Irish attack. Now, this year, though, it might be a little bit different because of Sam Hartman. Notre Dame will still rely on Audric Estime, of course, to run the ball, but they have a quarterback that can keep the Ohio State defense honest. It's much harder to stop the run when you don't need to pack the box with 9 defenders. Hartman has the deep shot that can open up this game, that can go downfield, that can make the Notre Dame passing game a viable threat. Now, it remains to be seen whether Notre Dame will want to run the ball more. Freeman said he's a running coach, but they have the quarterback to amplify the running game, and I suspect that's going to be a big element in today's game.
100%. And on the offensive side, for OSU, for Notre Dame, what players should we be looking at to really make an impact this game?
We'll talk a little more about him later, but Marvin Harris Jr. is the obvious answer. This is a player that is going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft almost assuredly. He might even be a top 5 pick. This is a special prospect, I should say, at the wide receiver position. He can, really break game open at any given moment. He has that high-end speed to, you see there, run away with games. And, he's a player that Ohio State knows, if they can just get him open once, he can break this game wide open. Benjamin Morrison's going to have a heck of assignment. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. If they can contain Marvin Harrison, they might just win this game. But if they can't, Ohio State's going to look to break it wide open.
100%. We'll definitely be neck and neck game. I think that's what most people are saying for this game coming up. But taking a step back and away from football, we have had a lot of other Irish sports going on campus this week and away. So we're handing it over to Avery and Alice, who are going to give us an update on everything Irish sports. To you guys.
Hey Irish fans, and happy almost game day. I'm Avery White.
And I'm Alice O'Brien, and we're here today with a recap of all we got going on this fall for Notre Dame athletics.
Starting off strong with some Irish running, multiple personal records were set by the cross-country team last Friday on both the men's and women's sides. This led to a big Irish win at the National Catholic Invite right here in South Bend. In other exciting news, Notre Dame alum Yared Nuguse broke the national mile record this weekend with a time of 3 minutes and 43 seconds. Quite the performance from him.
No, I felt really good starting out, and I really just wanted to make sure I want to maintain a lot and just really focus on having a strong finish at the end. And I did just that, and it was an amazing time, way closer to the world record than I thought. So.
Moving on to soccer, where the men have had an impressive start to their season, with their current record being 4-1-3. Keep an eye out for a big game for the men tonight as they take on the Virginia Cavaliers in Alumni Stadium at 8 p.m. The women have proven to be strong as well, with a solid record of 5-1-2 and are now ranked 10th in the NCAA. They look to continue a dominant run on Sunday as they take on Pittsburgh at home, and we'll see if goalie Ashley Naylor can keep it between the pipes.
Next, we'll take a look at volleyball. The Fighting Irish have had a strong start to the season, going 3-0 at home so far and driving in an overall record of 6-2. They've won their last 4 games in a row, and they're hoping to continue their winning streak as they look to take on Boston College at home tonight at 6:30.
As for women's golf, the ladies have finished up their first competitions of the season at the Boilermaker Classic and Mary Fossum Invitational, and they look ahead towards the Glass City Invitational on September 25th and 26th.
And of course, this wouldn't be a fall sports recap without mentioning the Fighting Irish football. The boys are indeed back and have had a remarkable start to the year with a current 4-0 record.
The Hartman-Freeman duo has certainly been electric, and Audric Estime has been having himself quite the stellar season as well. As we gear up for College Game Day in South Bend, the Irish remain eager to show big-time rival Ohio State just what they are made of, and I sure can't wait to watch.
I can hardly wait either. Finally, looking ahead to the near future, men's tennis looks to start their season this weekend when they head to Princeton, and hockey has their first game slated at home against Clarkson on October 7th. Both the men's and women's swimming and diving teams have their opening inter-squad meet on September 30th and their first official meet on October 6th at UW-Madison as well.
Well, that's all we have for you today with our fall sports recap.
Yes, make sure to wear your green this weekend, Irish. For Shamrock Sports, this is Avery and Alice, sending it back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Avery and Alice. We appreciate that in-depth reporting. I know myself and Tyler Reedy will be running right over there to kick off volleyball in the ACC slate. But look, bringing a new freshman, Ben Rohr, and he is our O-line insider. And Ben, we got a lot to break down. This is going to be a very crucial part to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be here, Jake. So if we take a look at this play from the first quarter of the Central Michigan game here, if we could hit play here on the highlight, we'll see a handoff to Estime. So we see Greyhouse go into motion. So stop the frame right here. So we already see Carell and Fisher are down on the ground against the Central Michigan D-line. So right here, it's sort of fuzzy, but you could see they're already down on the ground. Central Michigan was using this tactic where they would bring their defensive linemen towards the center on an inside run, and our offensive line would sort of collapse. So again, watching it in the student section, I saw a lot of our inside run plays shut down early, and we would sort of rely on a big play to sort of open it back up. So if we go to the next highlight here, we're going to see a deep ball from Hartman where each of our linemen sort of get a one-on-one matchup on the line. So pause it again. Look at this pocket that Hartman has created. Or that our offensive line has created for Hartman here. He has all the time in the world to find whoever he needs to find and get the job done. So when our run plays were sort of collapsing early, Hartman was able to get a big pocket from the offensive line and find a man down the field. So if we run it again.
You can cook in there.
Absolutely. Boom. Big ball. What we needed right there. So big matchups here, but Joe Alt, in an interview, he mentioned 2 players. Tommy Eichenberg for Ohio State, huge on the up-the-middle run game. So pause it right here. As I mentioned, on the inside runs, this is where Tommy has been thriving. He's been screaming up the middle and breaking through the offensive line and getting a quick tackle. Yeah.
And then on top of that, you look at Estime, you look at this heavy run game, that's where they've been going up the gut for the most part.
Absolutely.
So you have to imagine that's also going to be part of the game plan.
Absolutely. And Joe Alt, of course, was very sort of timid in his answers, but there's a reason he mentioned Tommy Eichenberg's name. So then also if you look at JT Tuimoloau for Ohio State, again, had a huge game against Penn State last season. Hopefully this is not that big game against us as well. So he's tearing in through these sacks here. So pause there. Yeah, so coming in there. But yeah, so against the Ohio State defense, our offensive line is going to have to mark these 2 guys. Yeah. There's a reason Joe Alt said their names. It's going to be a big matchup. The boys in the trenches are going to have to get it done. So we can hopefully have that run game as a piece of our offense, unlike the Central Michigan game where we're sort of shut down and we needed a big pass play to sort of get us down into the scoring position.
And then ultimately, you also look at the fact of Sam Hartman got rolled up again by the Chippewas.
Yeah, exactly.
We are now talking about big Power 5 men that have that ability to get through that line a little bit quicker.
Yeah, Tommy Eichenberg, I think, was up for every award that a linebacker could be up for last season. So a bit of a step up from the Chippewas, but I think based on what I've been seeing from Hartman, Freeman, and Alt in the interviews, they're ready, they're poised, they're, treating it like any other game.
Hey, treating it like any other game with College Game Day, everybody on the line. And this isn't just a matchup me and you are talking about.
No.
This is a matchup NBC will be bringing to their broadcast as well. Earlier this week, I was able to catch up with Noah Eagle, who will be on the broadcast for the NBC with Todd Blackledge and Catherine Tappan. I talked to him earlier this week. What do you think is the biggest matchup fans should be looking for that you guys might be showcasing on your broadcast?
Yeah, so, Todd Blackledge and I were talking about it a little bit earlier, and I think we agree that this game's going to be won in the trenches. And so I go back to that run game a little bit, and I say Notre Dame's offensive line's been dominant through their first 4 games, and rightfully so. You've got 2 of the best tackles in the entire country and a clear-cut All-American, maybe the top offensive lineman drafted this year in Joe Alt. And then on the other side, in what Fisher's been able to do, you've got 2 just tremendous, tremendous offensive linemen. But this Ohio State defensive front is going to be a lot different than what they've seen through the first 4 games. So if Notre Dame can control the line of scrimmage, they give themselves an outstanding chance to win the game. But if Ohio State can bring pressure, if they can stop the run, I think that it dramatically changes what Notre Dame's going to have to do on the offensive side. I do think that Sam Hartman being there as just veteran presence is a massive deal. But that's the matchup, I guess, is the Notre Dame offensive line against Ohio State defensive front that we're really looking at in terms of what's going to skew the game. I think a lot of people, just in terms of excitement, are going to look at Marvin Harrison Jr. against Benjamin Morrison because of just the sheer talent on both sides. And no doubt we're going to be keeping our eyes absolutely locked in on that. But in terms of what's going to make the biggest impact, I got the trenches in this game for sure.
Trenches, it's not always the fun and fluffy stuff that those skill position players, but that line is going to be very interesting. And that's something we're going to talk about later in this show as well, about the line and how they figure that out. But ultimately, I know you're a big movie guy as well. You're a big pop culture guy. Is there a movie right now? Have you seen Rudy, A? And then B, is there a movie right now that you're like, got to go watch it?
So I've seen Rudy probably 15 times minimum. I, as a sports fan / movie fan, if there's a sports movie, especially if it was good, I've seen it probably far too many times. But I have seen Rudy many, many times, which makes me even more excited, obviously, to get to South Bend and feel like I'm living it my own way, so to speak. So that's for one, and I think I'm going to enjoy that aspect. I wouldn't say there's one movie right now that I feel like everybody has to go see. I know everyone's been locked in on Oppenheimer for the last couple months here, and I will say I still have yet to see Oppenheimer. I've seen Barbie, but I have not seen Oppenheimer, and it's not even because I don't want to. I love Christopher Nolan. He's probably my favorite director, but I just haven't had 3 hours to actually dedicate to it yet. And I want to see it in IMAX, so I kind of am running out of time. But either way, I'll make sure to do it. Barbie was outstanding. I highly recommend it. But I think that you got to find your genre and you've got to just kind of stick to it. I know exactly what I like, which is pretty much anything, and I'll watch any movie and feel real good about it. So during football season, it's a little bit more difficult just because I get ingrained and entrenched into the information and trying to study and make sure I'm ready to go for the games. But when I get those moments hit different, man. They really do.
We cannot thank Noah Eagle enough for taking the time to sit down with me earlier this week. However, our full interview is available on our YouTube page. Go to NDTV on YouTube to get the full interview. There's a lot in there. We also talk about a little bit of his first time coming to South Bend. It is a lot of fun time here as well. But we also talked about in this matchup here, there's a lot to look at, and that is the Heisman candidacy. And there is 3 here, and our broadcasters come back to talk about why they watch the game. Guys?
Well, certainly plenty of game-changing players to watch in this one, beginning with 3 Heisman candidates at 3 different skill positions out there between Ohio State and Notre Dame. You got Buckeyes wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. and Notre Dame quarterback and running back Sam Hartman and Audric Estime, respectively. Let's start with Harrison Jr., really going up against a highly talented and potential shutdown secondary for the first time this year.
Yes, Notre Dame secondary has a lot of depth across the board, but, obviously they have some star power as well in the presence of Benjamin Morrison. And we saw what he can do in big games last year, the big pick 6 against Clemson. He was outstanding in that game, really improved dramatically throughout the course of the season. He's one of the best cornerbacks in the country, and he's going to prevent Marvin Harrison Jr. with a really tough task. Obviously, Harrison certainly has been up to the task against almost every secondary that he's faced so far. So Notre Dame team's going to make it challenging on him, but if he can pull through, it's going to be a major boost to his.
And a proven opportunity as well for these Notre Dame offensive talents in Hartman and Estime. A lot of the critics of their performances so far have been that they haven't faced anybody for real yet, but Ohio State is certainly a real commodity within college football, and those 2 have opportunities to really shine on Saturday night.
Certainly, and talking about the Clemson game last year, obviously Audric Estime, one of the stars of that game, the Notre Dame ground game, of course, leading the way. Estime, running backs are not as highly valued as they once were, but Audric Estime has a chance in this game and throughout this season to prove that he might be an exception to that rule, of course, having a great junior season thus far. And Sam Hartman, he's played outstandingly throughout his college career, but this is definitely going to be the biggest game he's ever played on. Wake Forest has usually been a good team, but definitely not a national championship contender or even a playoff contender in recent years. So for him to have this opportunity to not just lead his team to victory over a top opponent, but to potentially lead them deep into postseason play, it's a really special one, and he's got a great opportunity here, and Irish are hoping he won't waste it.
From the stars on the field back to the stars in the studio, let's send it back for some more conversation on Notre Dame and Ohio State.
Thanks, guys. Definitely a lot to watch with the Heisman this year. We got a lot of great candidates, but let's talk about this game specifically again. Let's talk about the special teams here with JJ Post. Special teams, how much of a factor will they be able to play in tomorrow night's game?
Yeah, special teams may not win the Heisman in the media and the national polls, but they'll win the Heisman of my heart. As I've always said, special teams make special teams, and Notre Dame, it's not Brian Mason's unit. They're not going to probably single-handedly change the game like we saw against perhaps Clemson last year, where Notre Dame's special teams unit actually outscored Clemson on their own and really changed the character of the game when they blocked that punt in the first quarter. But Notre Dame special teams still are a unit that can make an impact in this game. Spencer Schrader, specifically, a player that Notre Dame clearly trusts from a really long distance. We've seen him line up from 59, from 56, from 54, see here from South Florida, from the parking lot, as some basketball commentators would put it. This is a guy Notre Dame trusts to hit kicks in pressure situations, in situations where normally Notre Dame wouldn't kick the ball. And we'll see here. The punt block unit is still a factor. Notre Dame is, has insisted, since Brian Mason, Marty Biaggi, now leading the special teams unit, has wanted to try to get guys after the punter. It hasn't been as effective this year, but hey, maybe they're due. Notre Dame will always put their weapons on the special teams unit because they want that unit to make a difference. Freeman in particular, one of the biggest changes, or perhaps one of the more underrated changes from going to Kelly to Freeman, was Freeman has always been a guy that's put a lot of emphasis on the special teams. Kelly usually, his mentality was more special teams, they sort themselves out. And, for Kelly, it worked out pretty well at Notre Dame. His special teams weren't ever really a disaster, but they never really made an impact either, especially in the way that Freeman's units have done. This year, the special teams have been more average than elite, but they have the potential to be elite. And if Spencer Schrader hits a 59-yard field goal to beat Ohio State, I think we all know whose praises are going to be sung after the game. Not saying it'll come down to that, but unlike last year, Notre Dame has a kicker that they trust in a situation. If they want to go from a deep, deep shot, they'll give it to Schrader and let him go for it.
For sure, and I know I've been hearing a lot about people who think that this could come down to just a one last field goal or an extra point between these two mighty teams. But hey, let's talk about Ohio. We have our Columbus, Ohio local Kian, who is a Notre Dame student, so I'm hoping he's rooting for Notre Dame. But he went and let us know what we can expect from the fans coming here from Columbus. And what do we got to know? Kian.
Thanks, fellas. Certainly a lot of buzz and questions going around the South Bend air this week on campus as we approach the historic College Game Day sanctioned matchup.
OSU could pack the stadium because when Cincinnati, Freeman's former team, came to Notre Dame Stadium 2 years ago in a top 10 matchup, there was certainly a lot of red in those stands. Granted that this game is a similar scenario to the Cincinnati game, even more monumental because of College Game Day, you could count on a similar outcome in the stands. Here's why Ohio State will not pack the stadium. We have not had a Notre Dame team that has been this dominant, disciplined, and offensively flashy in years, in scenarios where prior teams, especially last year, would fall, like when we were only up by 7.5 against CMU, and in a dogfight with NC State. This team has risen up to the occasion. Prior ND teams have played to the level of their competition. Notre Dame has been consistently superior and dominant. With this being said, Notre Dame has a great chance to win this top 10 dogfight, the greatest chance that they'll have for a while due to Hartman leaving after this year. So this game will be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. ND won't let OSU pack the stadium. Historical arrogance at the hands of OSU fans, they will not think much of ND. Also, the only game that they care about is Michigan. Also, Ohio State fans think Freeman is unqualified for his job, which is shocking because the only thing more hot than Marcus Freeman is Ryan Day's seat. So overall, OSU fans will think that this will be an easy win and will not see the urge or need to come to South Bend and pack the stadium.
Welcome you back here to the second floor here. And when you look at these two comments and you look at, ultimately, you look at Marvin Harrison Jr. and then you look at Benjamin Morrison here, and there is a lot to talk about in this matchup. We touched on it a little bit. Although Notre Dame doesn't normally play the matchup game in the corners, this is going to be a matchup that you're going to want to watch.
Absolutely. Marvin Harrison Jr., we said it already, he's an elite prospect. He probably will be the first receiver going in this year's NFL draft. He might be one of the 5 players that go in the top 5. He's a special player, and Notre Dame is going to need to have a unique game plan if they want to approach him in a way that's going to work effectively. Thankfully, they have a corner that is one of the nation's best, Benjamin Morrison. You see here, Marvin Harrison Jr. is a player that can, at any given moment, it's a track race. Look at that. He does the little track finisher celebration because he knows he has that breakaway speed. And, it's not really possible to game plan for him perfectly. He just has too many tools. He's got a great catch radius. He's got great speed. He's physical. You can't really scheme him out of the game. But what you can do is you can let Benjamin Morrison, who has proven to be capable of handling tough assignments before, bump up on him and, play his best. Notre Dame has faith in their cornerback room. And not just Benjamin Morrison, too. Yeah. Cam Hart, I don't think maybe gets the respect he often might get on a different Notre Dame team because we have someone like Benjamin Morrison as the number 1 corner. But Cam Hart is uniquely overqualified to be that number 2 corner. It wouldn't surprise me if we see some of him on Harrison, too, maybe if they want to switch it up a bit because he has that length that Morrison doesn't have. He's got a wide frame. He's a player that can really match up better physically with Harrison. It's going to be a lot of Morrison and Harrison, but I wouldn't be surprised either if you see maybe a different look from Notre Dame every once in a while just to keep Harrison honest, just to keep the Ohio State offense honest. Ultimately, it's going to come down, I think, this game to this matchup. It's not going to be, the end-all, be-all, but if one side wins decisively, if Notre Dame is able to take Harrison out of the game completely, that's unlikely. If Harrison's able to go off for some unguardable game, I don't think that's likely either. If either of those 2 scenarios happen, though, I think the winner of that matchup will be the winner of the game. Remains to be seen how decisive the winner will be, though. I suspect it's going to be a very tightly contested matchup.
And you talked about it. Stanford Steve talked about it in his game day availability here earlier today. And it was the fact that it will be everybody around him that has to contribute for Harrison Jr. ultimately in this game because Notre Dame's got, once again, you talk about Cam Hart and you talk about Morrison, but if you have all these other pillars, it's going to be a lot for the Notre Dame defense to talk about. Yeah, one of the great things about Harrison, if you're Ohio State, is he takes the attention off of the 10 other players on the field. It's not just Kyle McCord throwing to Marvin Harrison running one-on-one routes. There are still 3 more receivers usually in the spread offense Notre Dame will need to account for. There are running backs that Notre Dame will need to account for because they can't stack the box because Harrison's running around that secondary. It makes playing complementary football for Ohio State that much easier because it's easier to run when you have a good passing game and it's easier to pass when you have a good running game. That's how football tends to work with an elite offense. Ohio State has that. Harrison Jr. is one of those players where Notre Dame is going to need to commit a lot to him. They're going to need to shadow him. They need to keep an eye on him. They're going to need to do everything in their power to make sure he doesn't go off. But because they're going to be paying so much attention to him, they got to make sure they don't slack off on the various other receivers in that Ohio State room. Julian Fleming, Mika Ibuka. These are players that can also go off for big days. It's going to be a hard task for Notre Dame secondary, and beating Ohio State is going to be more than just beating Marvin Harrison Jr., but it would be a good start. It would be a good start indeed. We'll take a quick break and be right back. This is Shamrock Sports on NDTV.
Hi Irish, my name is Elise Dohoney and I'm the NDTV Director of Operations. If you'd like to support NDTV, make sure to click on the link on the screen or in our description. It's an Amazon link, will take you straight to the site, and any purchase you make through that link, we receive a small portion of the revenue. This is a great way to support NDTV and get all those things you need for the perfect Notre Dame tailgate. I'm talking, mugs and flags and hats and all the merch that you need. So make sure to click on that link and support NDTV. We're here for all of you. Thank you. Well, welcome back to the studio. I'm Elise Dohoney here again with JJ Post. You're just bouncing around all over the place today, but we are here for our favorite segment of the show, Shambookie. And you have a lot to say this week. Yeah. We have your 3 best bets of the week, all you.
Yeah, so I've got 3 things I'm looking at. I tried to go for 1 underdog, one favorite, 1 underdog, and 1 prop. Start with the prop. I'm breaking my own rule, and I'm betting the over on a Big Ten game. Normally, you don't want to do that, but I like Michigan-Rutgers for the over this weekend because it's 44, which is low. It's Big Ten low. Big Ten obviously usually low-scoring games, so it's not all surprising. But I like it for a couple reasons. For one, Michigan has a bit of history with Rutgers. Rutgers upset them a long, long time ago, and ever since then, the game's had some chippiness to it. Michigan will have an incentive, especially because it's Jim Harbaugh's first game back after suspension. If this game gets out of hand, Michigan will want to run up the score. They're not going to stop scoring. They're not going to maybe slow it down, and if they start scoring, they're going to look to get up to 40, 50 points. So they might just get it on their own. But Also of note, in this matchup, historically speaking, Rutgers has kept it kind of close with Michigan. They've played Michigan well, at least in the last few matchups, and there's a chance, they're not going to probably win this game. But if they get 10 points on the board, if they can get 17 points on the board, it makes the task of Michigan to hit the over and get that requisite 24 points, makes it that much easier. I think this is a very attainable over, and obviously not exactly two super high-powered offenses. Michigan is great. Rutgers is probably more capable than great, but it's competent. I think given the script of the game, it either goes two ways. Rutgers keeps it close, and we got sort of a 24-20 rock fight. That would get the over, or Michigan blows them out and wants to run up the score to show the NCAA that they're not happy with Jim Harbaugh's suspension, and they hit the over on their own. Either way, I like over 44 points. The other game I'm looking at is in the Big 12. Cincinnati, Oklahoma. I like Oklahoma to cover the spread here. Oklahoma is a team that's had a very hot start to the season under Brent Venables. It's a team that I think is looking to prove some doubters wrong. It's their final season in the Big 12, and this is their first Big 12 game of the year, so there's going to be some adversity there, even though Cincinnati is a new Big 12 team and not exactly a traditional foe. That being said, Oklahoma started the season very hot. They've got a high-powered offense, and Cincinnati hasn't done that, to say the least. They scraped out a win against Miami last week, the Miami of Ohio, not the Miami of Florida. It's just not a performance that's inspiring a ton of confidence. It's going to be at Nippert Stadium, so that does cause for me some concern with this bet. But ultimately, you got to look at the two respective resumes. Oklahoma's been blowing teams out. They look to be having a prove-it year. Cincinnati has been good, but they're mainly scraping by, and this could be a reality check game for them in the Big 12. I like Oklahoma to cover that spread. And lastly, my underdog of the week, I like Washington State +3 against Oregon State. This is a game that means a lot if you're a fan of college realignment. These are two programs that have been, for lack of a better term, allies in the fight against realignment. Two teams that were kind of sectioned out of the Pac-12 in the rebuilt Pac-12, and two programs that have been making their case that they should stay in the Power 5. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of animosity there. But it's in Pullman, and Pullman, if you saw that Washington-Wisconsin game, that's a special atmosphere. They're playing with a purpose this season. This is a good Washington State team. And Oregon State, make no mistake, it's a good team as well. But I think Washington State, what this game means to them at home with the home field advantage, the factor of that crowd knowing it could be their last season playing, high major games in that stadium, I think it's just going to mean a little bit more. I think they're coming out playing with purpose. I like them to cover or win outright at +3.
There you go. Definitely a lot to watch tomorrow in all those games. We're going to take a quick break before we wrap up this show, but stick with us.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to ND Sunrise.
This is the
review of the Keenan Review.
That's right. We've got a big game in Sin City.
Plot twist. I am the Grim Reaper.
Overall, this year's event was a rousing success.
Would Notre Dame be the first one to accept ASL as a foreign language as a department?
Once again, I'm Elena Morgan from ND Sunrise, signing off.
And welcome back to the studio. We are now in the final leg of our show for score predictions for tomorrow's 7:30 game in Notre Dame Stadium. Jake Irons, JJ Post, back with Elise Dohoney. I'll start with you, Jake. Who are we thinking is going to win tomorrow's game? By how much?
I am normally a very big pessimist on this panel. I'm a pessimist no more. Sam Hartman has it. Give me Notre Dame in a close one, 35-33. Irish are going to get it done. Normally on these things, I've always been a Notre Dame hater. I think this is a team that if you're going to pick them to win in a big game, this is the team right now. Give it to me.
For sure. I mean, I am also going to go with Notre Dame 27-24. I think it is going to come down to those special teams and maybe a last-minute field goal. So I will be in those stands tomorrow night rooting for Notre Dame all the way through. JJ?
All right, I won't lie to you guys. Usually I have some sort of clever monologue planned out for this, some sort of stunt. I don't have that. I don't have the sunglasses from last week. It's a big game, and I tried to do something with heart of a champion, Sam Hartman. It just wasn't there for me. But I got an actual pick. For me, this game comes down to the quarterbacks. Whoever wins the quarterback battle, I think, wins the game. Kyle McCord's a talented player. He's never played in a game of this stakes. Sam Hartman hasn't either, per se, but he has played in big games before. I think the winner of the quarterback battle wins the game. And I'm rolling with the guy who's making his 50th career start in South Bend. Give me Notre Dame 38-35.
For sure. And I think looking at all of our teams' scores for this week, I think we have a lot of Notre Dame fans this week. A lot of people who are picking Notre Dame. I think so.
I hope.
You would hope. We're paying tuition here.
We are a little bit biased. But definitely an exciting game to look out for tomorrow night. Notre Dame Stadium, 7:30. Ohio State right up against our favorite Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We'll see how it goes. See you next week.